Welcome back to Skeletal Muscle Structure and Function, a Coach Carter education series. Today is video 3. We're going to talk about the neuromuscular connection. So up until now, we've been staying mostly at the level of the muscle. Today, we're going to add the nervous system to it, see how the two interface together, and see how this allows us to regulate force output. So before we talk function, we've got to talk a little bit of structure, as structure will dictate function. And we start with the motor unit. So this is our functional motor unit, our functional unit of the neuromuscular system. A motor unit is commonly defined as a single motor neuron and all the muscle fibers that it innervates. So you can think of this as you have one motor neuron coming from your spinal cord that will attach to multiple muscle fibers. Some motor units will have a lot of muscle fibers. This prioritizes force over precision, whereas some motor units have a very small number of muscle fibers that allows for highly precise movement. An example of a small motor unit would be one in your eye that makes these really small, precise movements. An example of where there are a lot of larger motor units would be in some of your big quad muscles that are extremely powerful and don't really have any reason for precision. Now, an important concept, when a motor neuron fires an action potential or an impulse or a signal, every single one of those fibers that is innervated by it will generate force. This is called the all or none principle. Now, remember, this is only per motor unit. This doesn't mean that your entire muscle either fires or it doesn't. It just means that all of those fibers of a specific motor unit will fire or not fire. From our structure of motor units, we get some functions that help us regulate force. The first of which is called Henneman's size principle. This is just named after the guy that established it, but the basic concept is that motor units are going to be recruited from smallest, so think fewer muscle fibers, to largest as force demand increases. So typically, if you're going to perform a squat, you're going to recruit your smaller motor units first and then go up to the largest as the force demand increases. The motor units with higher threshold motor neurons are therefore recruited last. This stays true for almost all force demanding muscle contractions. There are some niche cases where this principle is broken a little bit, but for the most part, they will be recruited from smallest to largest in rapid succession. The other way that we can regulate force at the motor unit level is with twitch summation. So this is just the additive effect of a muscle twitch or just a short muscle contraction. Now, if you think back to video 2, when we have the sarcoplasm flooded with calcium ions, these calcium ions don't just go away right away after a twitch. The level of calcium stays elevated between action potentials. And because it stays elevated, it allows subsequent action potentials to arrive before full relaxation, allowing this additive effect. Now, at super high frequencies, a sustained near maximal tension is achieved, which is called fused tetanus. These two principles together allow us to regulate force at the motor unit level. This Henneman's size principle will be referred to as motor unit recruitment, sometimes as motor unit synchronization, and twitch summation, right? This additive effect of high firing frequencies can also be called rate coding sometimes. So we've talked about action potentials in our motor neuron, and we've talked about action potentials in our muscle at the fiber level, but we haven't yet talked about how it crosses the gap. Okay, there's a literal gap between our motor neuron and our muscle fiber that we call the synaptic cleft. This whole thing together, the terminal end plate of our motor neuron and the motor end plate of our muscle fiber, is referred to together as the neuromuscular junction, or you'll see it abbreviated a lot as NMJ. So first we have this action potential that runs down our motor neuron that arrives at the nerve terminal, right? This ending point of the nerve where it's going to jump off to the muscle fiber. Now, when the action potential arrives at the end of our motor neuron, it causes depolarization of that terminal. There are voltage-gated calcium channels that open on the nerve terminal that allow an influx of calcium ions into the nerve. Okay, so calcium is being used again, but this time in the nerve. When calcium levels elevate inside of this nerve terminal, it triggers a release of acetylcholine. Okay, this is a really important hormone in muscle contraction, and the acetylcholine is released into the synaptic cleft, or the space in between our neuron and our muscle fiber. This acetylcholine reaches the sarcolemma. If you remember, this is our specialized cell membrane of our muscle fiber cell, which causes the muscle fiber to depolarize and go through all the steps we talked about in video 2. When the action potential stops and the acetylcholine release stops, any acetylcholine left in that synaptic cleft space is broken down, thus terminating the signal entirely. So, to summarize, the neuromuscular connection, we have a motor unit that links the spinal cord to muscle contraction, right? One motor unit is a motor neuron and all of the muscle fibers that it innervates, okay? Some can have just a few fibers, some can have tons of fibers, depending on the purpose of that muscle, how precise it needs to be, and how much it's just relied on for force production. The all or none principle says that a motor unit is either off or on, right? Either all of those fibers are on or all of them are off. Henneman's size principle is one way that we regulate force. It states that a forceful contraction will start with smaller motor units and then progress to larger ones. The summation of the motor unit action potentials, or twitches, can happen super fast to produce maximum force within a motor unit, or fused tetanus, right? This sustained contraction. The neuromuscular junction is, right, the end of our motor neuron, the synaptic cleft between the motor neuron and the muscle fiber, and the motor end plate of that muscle fiber's sarcolemma. Calcium and acetylcholine are two really important parts of this process. You can go back and look at it again, but in our next video, we're just going to do a little one-slide recap of everything, just connecting it all together from initial action potential all the way through to our power stroke. Okay, so I'll see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.